Have you ever met a serial killer? I think I did, and I'm relieved that I didn't know it at the time. I used to chat a lot on MSN Messenger when I was in college. I was a shy and kind of nerdy girl, so talking and flirting with random guys was much easier when it was online instead of in the real world. We used to have a lot of internet stores that you could go and pay a couple of bucks and use the computer a couple times a week. I mean, it was the early 2000s, and technology wasn't available to everyone just yet. Sometimes it was just writing, and sometimes we'd use the cameras. There was this one guy that I remember really well. He was a lawyer, or so he said. He always refused to use the camera, even after we'd known each other for about a year. He was witty and funny, and I really liked him. He was a little bit older than me, and he was pretty good at sex talk, which was somehow appealing to a girl in her late teens. He was always asking personal questions. Where do you live? Do you live alone? Do you live with your family? Do you have a boyfriend? Can you travel alone? Of course, I always diluted the conversation and never gave him any information. Sometimes I would tell him a fake story, but then he would ask details and details, and I would end up telling him that it was fake and laughing about it. You would think it would bother him, but it didn't. He would always laugh and say it was just my wild imagination. I think our virtual relationship lasted for about 3 years. Now that I'm thinking about it, it lasted until I graduated college. One time he came to town where I was living. I was in my senior year. He said it was for work and insisted that we meet up. I agreed and told him about a coffee place where I like to drink coffee. He declined and said he had to work all day and that he'd be available after 9 p.m. and proposed that we meet in the apartment where he was staying. I thought it was weird, but at the same time I was excited and eager to meet him in real life. I finally agreed and told myself I'll just pass by and say hello and that'll be that. We agreed to meet the following day. He sent me the address, and because I know the area, I knew I would find my way easily. Unfortunately, that day at university, we had to prepare for a conference, me and a group of friends. The meeting took us longer than I'd planned, so I sent a message to the guy telling him that I had an unexpected bit of work to finish and I couldn't make it. He never responded, and I never heard from him again. A few years passed, and I moved to another city where I was pursuing a PhD. One day, out of nowhere, I received a mail from this guy. It was just a regular mail, where he was asking how I was doing and what I'd been up to lately. Honestly, I was a little bit surprised. We exchanged a few emails after that, and he told me he'd be happy to meet up if I was able to make time for him. That made me laugh. I thought, well, maybe it's time to finally meet this guy. Where I was living happened to be an hour away from the city he was living in. After a few back and forths and some more emails, he gave me the address. The location struck me as odd, but I didn't really think about it at the time. It was a bit out of the way, in a city I had visited a few times before. It was a new neighborhood. I didn't even think people were living there yet. The way I was supposed to get to his house was a bit weird, too. He said he would guide me on the phone and tell me how to get to his place. I took the train anyway, arriving at the station, and took a cab as I headed towards his neighborhood. I had to stop at an intersection and follow his instructions on the phone as he said. When the cab arrived at the intersection, the driver asked me if I was sure where I was going. I lied and told him this was the right area. I was surrounded by suburb villas, the kind with high walls and well-maintained front trees. It was a bit unnerving as I walked on the street where he said he lived. It was quiet, too quiet. At the end of the street there was a dozen duplexes with well-maintained hedges instead of fences. The street was empty but for 2 cars that passed by before I took a turn into an alleyway. I called him and he took me from there. I followed his instructions until I stopped in front of a duplex with a garage and a well-maintained front lawn. There was no car outside, and all the windows seemed to be closed but on the upper floors. A space in front of the garage was unexpectedly clean, and for a moment I thought maybe I had missed the right house. That's when I heard him say on the phone, "I can see you. Come on ahead inside." Then I looked up and saw the curtain dropping. I felt a real sense of unease, but I ignored it. Come on, don't be silly. I know this guy for almost 6 years. I'll finally get to meet him in person, I said to myself. I stepped towards the front door, pushed it when I came inside. It was the entrance to the duplex, leading up to a small lobby with stairs. The lobby was completely quiet, as if no one else lived here. I was about to close the door when, for some reason, I decided not to close it and just push it quietly. I went upstairs and saw number 11 on the door on the right. Before I could tap on the woody door, he opened it wildly. The inside of the apartment was kind of dark because of the lack of natural light. He stood there, wearing a black shirt and gray pants and bare feet, which was odd. He was partially bald and neatly shaved. He smiled and stuck his hand out for me to shake. "Well, hello there. You finally decided to do it, huh?" Something in his features was unsettling, as if he was up to something. It was as if I could see in his cold gray eyes something I couldn't explain that made me feel in danger. I reached out my hand to greet him. The moment his hand touched mine, a chill ran down my spine. "Yeah, finally," I responded out of politeness. My uneasiness must have shown on my face. He shook my hand, but he didn't let go of it, and his grip tightened. "I don't like it. I don't like this at all." "You can let go of my hand now," I said, with false amusement. He grinned, but he didn't let go. At that instant, I went into fight-or-flight mode. My heart started racing, and all my senses went crazy. He grabbed my hand and tried to pull me inside. I threw politeness out the window and yelled, "Let go of me! I said let go!" I was standing on the threshold. I gripped the wall with my left hand and tried to pull away from him. When I looked up, I saw the creepy expression of a predator and a smile that said, "I finally got you." I was not only trapped, but I also knew that no one would hear me outside the duplex. Even if someone could hear me, they'd have no idea where the screams were coming from. He wasn't a big guy. He was around my height and maybe a little overweight. Otherwise, he was able to easily overwhelm me. So I took my chance and let go of the wall and stepped inside. It caught him off guard, and I grabbed the doorknob with my left hand and began to slam the door repeatedly on his arm as he tried to walk me inside. He finally let go of my hand, and I heard a grunt as he fell over inside. I thanked God for my decision to leave the front door open. I ran through the quiet alleyway without looking back until I reached the intersection. I looked behind me, but I saw no one, so I continued running. I couldn't find any cabs in the area, so I ran nearly 10 minutes before spotting a cab. While running after him, I yelled the taxi down and waved my hands. He must have seen me in his rearview mirror because he came to a complete stop. I dashed to the cab, shaking uncontrollably as I got inside. The driver gave me a wide look and was about to ask me a question when I blurted out, "To the train station. Please, hurry." He gave me a brief look before resuming the drive. I arrived at the station, purchased a ticket, and then boarded the first train to my hometown. I switched off my phone because I was afraid that he would call or message me. When I arrived, I went to the train station convenience store and pretended to look for something. I knew they'd have cameras there, so if he followed me, I'll be caught on camera. I spent nearly 10 minutes wandering between the aisles. Finally, I went up to the cashier and bought a bottle of water. On my way home, I took 2 cabs in opposite directions to confuse anyone that was following me. I didn't feel safe until I got home and shut the door. For a brief moment, I considered calling the police, but what would I say to them? He didn't do anything. I hadn't been harmed, and I'm an adult who understands what I was doing. I cursed my stupid lack of self-preservation. I told no one about this misadventure and vowed never to go through another dangerous situation like this again. I never heard from the guy after that, but it took several months for me to completely forget about the encounter and move on with my life. Until this morning, that is, when I was reading the newspaper and noticed a familiar face, a face I'd never forget. The photo was titled MSN Predator, the serial killer who lured his victims to his home and never let them leave. According to the article, all 24 victims were young women between the ages of 17 and 23, whom the killer met on Messenger. During the interrogation, the defendant stated that some of his victims had been chatting with him for more than 2 years, and only one girl had slipped between his fingers twice, as he put it, because she was somehow smarter than the others. You ever heard of Millie, the hanged lady? That's what Josh, my best friend, asked me one night while we were camping in the woods. Seriously, is this another story you made up, Josh? Asked Sue skeptically. No, this is 100% true, seriously. You guys never heard of this? I shrugged my shoulders in denial. Josh loved telling stories, especially the urban legends he'd read on the internet. Most likely he'd prepared a dozen of them in advance for tonight. The story begins one night in the forest. Forest where we just happened to be, Josh began seriously. I smiled out of the corner of my mouth and exchanged a glance with Sue, who knew as well as I did, now that he was off and running, there was no stopping him. You see, Millie was a high schooler like the three of us, and ever since she was a little girl, she'd been picked on by the other kids. Millie was different from the others. She always kept to herself, didn't dare speak up, didn't mix well with the others, and soon she became the target of others' abuse. Over the years, her reputation followed her, and the harassment from the other kids in her class became increasingly cruel. Sue kept her neutral expression, but I could feel that the story touched her. She, too, had struggled to fit in after her parents had moved her here, and it was only after befriending Josh and me that she'd managed to come out of her shell. But if she hadn't, she might have been subjected to the kind of behavior on display here, too. In fact, she had confessed to me that this had even been the case at her previous school. One wintry evening, several students decided to play a prank on Millie, Josh continued, the flames from the campfire reflecting his eyes. They all grabbed scary masks and armed themselves with knives and chased Millie as she made her way home through the forest. Millie was terrified, and she fled as far as she could. She got lost in the forest. The story goes that during the night, cold, lost, and hungry, she found a rope stretched over a branch, like an invitation. And that was where she ended her life. What a horror, Sue said, still captivated by the tale. Since then, they say she haunts these woods, and that it's possible to summon her by repeating certain words. Cut the crap, I said uncomfortably. I swear it's true. All you have to do is stand in front of a branch and say, Millie, Millie, why are you so alone? 3 times. Then turn around and say, Millie, Millie, come talk to me. Just once. Then you'll hear the sound of a rope swinging under the weight of her body. And the story goes, if you're unfortunate enough to turn around and look at her, she'll kill you. Okay, that's definitely nonsense. No, really, Josh. You had me going at first, but I don't believe it anymore, Sue said, standing up. You'll excuse me, boys, but I'm going to hit the sack. Good night, and don't stay up too late tomorrow. We're leaving early. With that, she headed off to her tent. Josh and I stayed up a while, staring at the fire in silence, but as if he couldn't hold back any longer, he finally asked, Do you want to do it? Do what? I asked him. Well, repeat the sentence and everything. Come on, we've been walking around picking mushrooms all day. What the hell? I had a feeling that if I didn't agree, he'd ask me every night until I gave in. So, I preferred to take the lead. We found ourselves in front of a branch a few dozen feet from the camp, where the fire was beginning to fade. We had equipped ourselves with our flashlights to see where we were going. Josh seemed pretty excited. Have to admit that once we got to the branch, I was more apprehensive than I would have imagined about some stupid urban legend. You're the one doing it, Josh told me. Why me? It was your idea. It was your story. But I've already done it 15 times. Come on, it's your turn, man. Don't back down now. I huffed. This was pretty typical of Josh. I stood in front of the branch, flashlight in hand. Josh gave me the sentence to repeat 3 times, and with a stutter or two, I managed to get it right. I turned around, my back to the branch. Josh stood next to me because he said if he looked, it wouldn't work. Millie, come talk to me, I finally said in a whisper. Hey, don't shit yourself, Josh laughed. We waited for a few moments. Well, I don't hear any taunt rope noises. I guess that means I get to live. Maybe she was busy elsewhere tonight, Josh replied with a laugh. Come on, let's go to bed. It's starting to freeze out here. We headed back to the camp. I couldn't help but look back for a moment while holding my lamp in front of me. For a moment, I could have sworn I saw something moving from right to left near the tree where we'd been for a few moments. Damn, I really got to stop listening to Josh's stories. I was awakened sometime later by a scream. I scrambled to my feet, ears pricked and wondering if I'd imagined it. I could see through the canvas of my tent that it was still dark outside. "Josh, Sue?" I called aloud, our tents being right next to each other. No answer. Why the hell aren't they answering? If they're playing a prank on me, I'm going to kill them. I grabbed the flashlight from my tent, my cell phone, and quietly stepped out. "Josh, Sue?" I asked again. I lit up their tent in turns and noticed they were both open and empty. I couldn't remember clearly what I'd heard, but I thought the scream was from a girl. I couldn't believe for a second that Sue would participate in a prank like this, but if it wasn't that, then maybe something serious had happened. As I stood there trying to think about where they might have gone and what they might be doing, a strong wind blew. To my right, a few dozen feet away, I spotted something moving. "Josh, I swear to God, if this is one of your stupid jokes," I said as I slowly approached, my flashlight trying to shine through the vegetation around me. I walked towards where I thought I'd seen the movement, and finally I saw something just to my right moving again. Slowly, heavily, I heard the sound of a taut rope. I shone my flashlight from bottom to top, and there I saw Josh, hanging by his neck with a rope tied to a branch over a tree. I was silent for a few seconds at the shock. "Josh, please, stop this." His face was contorted in an expression of sheer terror. Eyes revolted back. His skin was blue, lifeless. I nudged him with my hand, and he just rocked back and forth a little. I couldn't believe it. It must have been an elaborate prank on his part. It wasn't possible. Not Josh. He was glowing with life. He would never take his own life like that, in the middle of the night, on a camping trip. The reality finally dawned on me, and I was overcome by a violent sob. My legs buckled, and I threw up on the ground. As I wiped my mouth, my eyes misty with tears, I heard something impossible. The sound of a taut rope slowly swinging right behind me. I straightened up, the sensation of mortal danger just behind my neck. "Who's there?" I asked, my voice trembling and still tight. The rope suddenly stopped moving. "Why don't you look at me?" said a feminine voice from beyond the grave, whose windpipe seemed to be strangled. What? Your friend looked at me. Look at him now. He's so much happier here with me." I remained silent, my eyes fixed in front of me, as if frozen in place. "It's impossible. She can't be real. You're having a nightmare. Wake up, wake up, wake up. Look at me." I ran. I didn't know where, and I didn't care. She'd killed Josh, and now this thing, whatever it was after me. After a minute, I remembered Sue's scream. She must have been awakened like me, maybe by Josh getting up, or when he'd been killed. She must have discovered the corpse, too. With any luck, she'd managed to escape. I figured if she'd gone off with her cell phone, she'd have tried to escape to the nearest road, which was about 15 miles, even though there was no way she could get there before the night was over. I tried calling the police and my parents without success, but luckily the GPS still seemed to work, so I followed the direction. I was walking fast so as not to collapse on the ground from exhaustion. I was already out of breath, and I couldn't stop. I always made sure to aim my flashlight at the ground in front of me to be on the safe side. The urban legend Josh had told me had said that you had to turn around and look at her for her to kill you, so maybe I shouldn't look her in the eye. I felt like I was being stalked. I flinched at every movement of a branch in the wind, and I constantly felt eyes on the back of my neck. But I was too scared to turn around. I had to get the hell out of the forest. "Sorry, Josh. I promise I'll come back for you. as soon as I find some help. I spotted an abandoned cabin we'd seen on the way here. I remembered that Sue had said that this was where we would find shelter if there was a storm or something. Suddenly I saw a light pierce the darkness through the wooden planks of the cabin. I sprinted towards it. "Sue! Sue, I'm coming!" I shouted out of breath. I stepped inside, the boards creaking beneath my feet. The light streamed in from under the door, and the cabin only had the one bedroom. I crossed the space between me and the door, glad I'd found Sue before I fled this place. I put my hand on the door handle. "Sue?" I paused. Silence was unnatural. Something was wrong. "Sue, are you okay?" I asked through the door, my hand still on the handle. "Answer me, please. You're freaking me out. Josh is dead, and the thing that killed him is still around. We need to get the hell out of here." No response. "Sue!" I noticed the light moving under the door, as if someone was holding the strap at the end of their finger and swinging right to left. "No, no, 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 no," I said in horror. In response, a childish laugh rang out from behind the door. I ran to the front door, which opened with a shove on my shoulder, and ran straight out of there. After a minute, I collapsed on the ground. It forced me to stop and think about what had happened. Maybe it wasn't Sue. Maybe this thing had managed to grab a flashlight and was just playing games with me. After all, I had no idea the extent of its abilities. I kept my eyes on my knees as I pondered what I'd seen. Then I heard it. The sound which I could now detect amongst any other sound. The sound of a rope stretching taut, swinging from left to right. Sound wasn't coming from behind me this time. It was from my left. I could feel her sinister gaze, inviting me to look at her and sealing my death in the process. I stood up, eyes on my feet, and started to run to my right, but I was stopped in my tracks. The sound of the rope was now coming from just ahead. Without thinking, I turned in the opposite direction. Again, sound was coming from right in front of me. She's everywhere. I'm screwed. I stood there with my eyes on my feet, trying to think of a solution. Josh was dead. Sue was missing, maybe dead too, and this running around all night. I closed my eyes, and tears quickly formed at the ends. I had an idea. Legend said that it was looking at her that allowed her to kill you. What if I just kept moving forward, looking at my feet, or even closed my eyes? The idea of walking through the forest with my eyes closed sent a chill down my spine. But what other choice did I have? I've been squatting here for several minutes now, writing this message. I've tried to call the police, but every time I call, all I get is static. I don't know where Sue is or how to get rid of this thing. I'm alone, I'm cold, and I'm exhausted. If you're reading this, please help me. Please help me. One of the first things my EMS cert teacher told me was that the touchiness would pass. That one day I'd be slipping IV needles into arms as easily as I floss between my teeth. Yet I was 2 weeks into my first full-time ambulance gig, and I was still shaking between calls. The 3-story inferno raging downtown didn't help, but that's not where me and my partner Tom were heading. Prior to this whole situation, our night was quiet, mostly dealing with confused dementia patients or burgeoning schizophrenics. The MO is either to find their medicine or transport them to the hospital. Most of our calls were like that, low stakes, right in my comfort zone. But now we were dispatched to a Priority 2 emergency, the kind of call that necessitates the whole lights and siren deal. Someone called in a possible self-harm situation involving one of their neighbors. Serious stuff, but I had Tom with me. He was a vet, a former cop, and I was always in his steady hands. The issue was that the downtown inferno had really messed traffic up for 2 solid miles in front and behind us. We hadn't moved more than 10 yards in about 5 minutes, and even though it was protocol to have a police response as well, we were as close to the front as it got. Hell, we were the front line at that point. Another minute passed in gridlock before Tom finally blurted out, "You gotta go alone." And there was really no other way. Abandoning the ambulance and blocking further fire trucks wasn't an option. Solo responses were rare, sure, but it was necessary in desperate circumstances like this. I knew it was coming, but it was the last thing I wanted to hear. Don't get me wrong, I wanted to go. Deep in my heart, I would be willing to lay my life down for a patient. I wanted so badly to be that type of cool, methodical mind that entered an emergency situation and eased their patient back from the brink. It just hadn't come to me yet. Tom saw it. I'm sure if seconds weren't the difference between life and death, he would have given me 5 minutes for a pep talk. For now, though, all he could do was pat my shoulder and smirk. "Knock 'em alive, kid." So out I went, squeezing myself between the bumper-to-bumper traffic until I found myself on the correct cross street. There's something horrifying in the minutes between their call and your arrival. The feeling creeps in while you're slipping over broken sidewalks and homeless tents, realizing you're the beginning and the end of their recovery. It all comes down to you, the practitioner. To be blunt, you're God for those few minutes, and God was having a pretty bad time gaining entry. Someone buzzed me in, but of course, apartment 13B was locked. Our response time was already woefully long, so waiting for police to break it down was not an option. I went to town using my bump key, prying it open less with finesse and more with raw, frantic energy. The door opened to near complete darkness. I saw candles around the corner and the end of the hall, but a whole lot of unknown was between me and there. Light switches were oddly dead, so my flashlight had to guide my feet. From the little I could see, it was a well-lived-in apartment. At least 2 generations had sunk their essence into the carpet. That's when the smell hit. It was familiar, the scent of a man. No, not exactly, no. It was like my granddad's musk. I hadn't smelled it since I was in his lap as a kid, but the recall was instantaneous. It made me feel oddly safe, which lasted only a few seconds, considering what I would soon see. Around the corner, there was a metric ton of candles in the living room. Every surface was covered with them. Weirdly, the wax was melting from every kind of receptacle except a candle jar. Bowls, mugs, shot glasses. The source of the musk, no doubt. They cast the entire room in a homemade devilish glow. They lit the way to the girl I would come to know as Ellie. She had wrapped herself up in the corner, laying motionless. Baggy sweats and a white tee hid her frailty at a glance. I rushed to her, set her on her back, and began to triage. First was the bruising on her neck. It was fresh, must have tried some sort of strangulation, but it wasn't what did her in, so I quickly moved on. Blood caked her white t-shirt. I followed it to her wrists. They were messy slashes, but they didn't look deep enough to do real harm. That's when I noticed the culprit of my light switch woes. Sloppily wound duct tape attached a fork to her hand, just a foot away from the charred-out power outlet. Christ, she'd electrocuted herself. Full cardiac arrest. She could have died in the seconds it took me to triage. My hand found position and began compressions. I regained some confidence as I found my rhythm, laying the foundation of the AED to work its magic. The repetitiveness gave me my first moment to take Ellie in. She was young, maybe even younger than my 19-year-old sister. Her being in this position seemed so wrong. I could see this face getting drunk at a college party, waiting tables at a diner in town, but not here. I thought about the second chance I wanted to give her as I continued compressions. That's when the room started to feel warm. The candle scent now got a bit clearer. It wasn't the manly musk of someone's grandfather. It was an animalistic scent. Dried blood and mange. Something that activated a long-buried fight-or-flight instinct in my primitive genes. I had to keep on with my compressions, though. Even if I had lost track of time, I might have been way short of 2 minutes when I decided to stop CPR and pick up the AED. It wasn't until I'd unzipped the bag that I realized this was the first time I'd used the AED in the field. I'd learned the ins and outs, tested it on course dummies, and seen others use it, but I'd never actually been tasked to use it in the field. I pulled up her shirt and applied the wire pads, again feeling a warmth that sent a bead of sweat down my neck. Finally, me, the naive idiot, decided to turn it on. The flames of the candle array now burned twice as bright. They licked high enough to start to uncover some of the shadows against the wall, revealing scraggy-looking wallpaper. No time to admire the settings, though. I waited patiently as the AED robotically counted down and administered the first shock. It picked up heartbeat rhythm automatically, but I still used my fingers to feel her absent pulse directly. It remained still. No response. Desperate, I repositioned my fingers as I checked for a pulse, and I didn't find one. Of that I was supremely confident. My fingers wiped some of the blood from her wrist as I did. Only now did I decide her cuts weren't at all random. They, in fact, cut out symbols in her flesh. A star. No, that was a pentagram. But the affirmative boop of the AED took my mind off the task. It rejiggered her heartbeat, automatically suspending its shocks. Any weirdness I felt came secondary to my resumed chest compressions. Resuscitation, especially with a faint heartbeat like this, always felt to me like pulling someone from quicksand. You're shoulder deep, clinging to a couple of fingers, hanging onto that little grip as you try to extract the entire person. If you're good, that little grip's all you need. I pumped with that metaphor in my mind's eye, laser focused on my goal. For 15 seconds, I felt like the ideal practitioner I dreamed of being, reeling my patient back from the brink. Until, I shit you not, the flames gained a life of their own. At first I thought it was just the ones directly in front of me, but as I spun I realized it animated every live flame, each one dancing its way towards the ceiling, causing the receptacles to bubble over with wax. You spend a lifetime watching flames move randomly, flicking with the wind, and I promise you their sudden conscious movement will rattle you to your depths. A full red light illuminated what I now realized wasn't wallpaper. It was blood-inked writing, overlapping scrawls of mantras over every wall and even possibly the ceiling. I imagined her crawling like a spider as she wrote, "Praise be all glory to the true one, may his new kingdom reign." Then finally the one spanning the entire main room. "May my blood serve as sacrifice." I suddenly felt like an interloper in a place I should not be, intruding on an ancient ritual. Whatever had its grip on her seemed to be in the room with me now. The flames kept up their height so I could take it all in, wax spilling over onto the floor. Looking back now, I think it was offering me a chance to reconsider what I was doing. It had its claim on her, but as her practitioner, I felt I had an equal claim. I resumed compressions, faster now, desperate to get her back as fast as possible. The flames swirled, seeming enraged by this development, and not letting me forget it. Yet somehow I was able to separate my technique from my panic-ridden nerves, keeping a tight rhythm for almost a minute before the girl finally snapped upright. The flames dissipated in an instant, down to tiny weak flickers. Her eyes were shut at first, like she was still within a blissful dream. Then her eyes opened to what she seemed to clearly think was a nightmare. Where'd he go? Where is he? She seemed taken by complete surprise, grounding herself back in reality as she pawed at herself. My practiced lines of patient comfort only enraged her. You have to let me get back. With rabid panic, she started to grab at her wrists, but soon realized it wasn't the most economic method of return. I finally regained my composure just as I saw her eyes meet the burned outlet. I screamed and grabbed at her leg, but her hand stretched to reach it. It connected, but unfortunately, it seemed she'd blown that out completely the last time. No shock was administered. Ellie kicked me off and stood, searching for a weapon, for a way out. It gave me a second to reason with her, person to person. That practiced BS now scared right out of me, but she responded with a level-headed reason that made it feel almost like she was speaking in my best interest. You don't understand. I'm the last one. He needs me. She raced across the room to the dresser, rifling through the top drawer. I went to pull her off when she struck me hard across the face. It wasn't a punch to harm as much as a utility swipe, keeping me away as economically as possible. I was a few feet away when she pulled the knife from the drawer. There wasn't any fanfare, no waiting to see the horrified look on my face. She just sliced it as fast as she possibly could. I don't remember if it was 2 or 3 good hacks before Tom rushed in to tackle her. In one swoop, he was able to pin her while cleanly plucking the blade from her grip. Blood pooled as he steadied her flailing arms with ease, getting the one she had sliced into the open. You okay? Once we had established that I was at least physically unharmed, I got back to work wrapping her wrist, stopping the brunt of the blood flow. Tom reinstated order to my rapidly deteriorating nightmare. As much as she wailed and cried in that first minute, she settled completely as she was padded up and restrained for transport. Her dead eyes followed me back and forth across the room as I spoke to the police officers that had arrived, burned into my scalp even when I turned around. She seemed to have come to a realization, something that set her at complete peace even here in the reality she had been forced back into. Stupid me, I reasoned that maybe I'd given her a new lease on life, something she would cherish. Stupid. That was a week ago. There were 5 total ritual suicides that night, aside from Ellie. All were successful. The first was a young artist who burned herself on a pyre, setting her warehouse studio aflame. That was the inferno that caught Tom and I in the traffic heap. My first patient died 2 days later. He was a 12-year-old boy suffering from asphyxia after eating some mislabeled Chinese food. An EpiPen was administered by his mom, but it wasn't enough. We arrived in time and got the epinephrine IV in. However, his heart responded in a bizarre fashion. It began to rapidly slow with the increasing dose. He wasn't just dying, it was like I was killing him. He died so fast it took his mom 2 minutes to realize. The longest 2 minutes of my life. 1 is a fluke, but 6 are a pattern. 5 more of my patients would die, some with completely non-life-threatening conditions. My supervisor comforted me after the first, but things darkened quickly from there. Despite the fact that I was investigated and could not have done anything different, I was suspended indefinitely. It took me almost a week to find Ellie. From the hospital, they bounced her between a few psych wards until landing her at one for, shall we say, more intense cases. Despite this, their windows were not barred, just thick and secured tight with latches. Something told me hers would be unlocked. It was. She's sleeping. Been this way for the last hour. I've gripped and released the knife in my pocket 100 times over, though. Waking up in the cozy lodge on Mount Lauronite, I eagerly embraced a day of skiing. The slopes offered a thrilling adventure, with powdery snow and stunning vistas. After a lively day on the mountain, I joined fellow skiers at the lodge cafe, sharing stories by the fireplace. Exploring the lodge's amenities revealed a spa and a charming library. The evening brought a gourmet dinner, and I ended the day stargazing on the deck. The perfect blend of adventure and relaxation made my first day on Mount Lauronite unforgettable. As night fell on the lodge, an eerie symphony of crashing trees and inhuman screeches filled the air. The lodge's deck offered a haunting view of the turmoil in the forest, with unsettling sounds emanating from a nearly 7-foot cliff face. Inside, guests exchanged uneasy glances, seeking refuge in the lodge's warmth. The staff reassured us, attributing the unsettling noises to natural forces. Despite the mysterious backdrop, the lodge maintained its comfortable ambience. As I settled into my room, the unsettling sounds persisted, creating a restless atmosphere. The night at the lodge unfolded as a surreal blend of awe and unease, leaving unanswered questions lingering in the mountain air. In the dim moonlight on the lodge's deck, the unsettling symphony of sounds reached a chilling climax, intrigued by the mysterious commotion, a cacophony peering into the night. Suddenly a grotesque creature emerged from the shadows, its form illuminated in the moon's eerie glow. The creature stood tall, its silhouette a nightmarish amalgamation of sinew, limbs, and gnarled features. Its eyes glowed with an otherworldly intensity, capturing the darkness within its twisted form. Jagged spines adorned its back, casting ominous shadows as it moved. The creature noticed me on the balcony, its screech intensifying, sending shivers down my spine. The sound was a blend of anguish and malevolence, echoing through the mountainous terrain. The creature's movements were unsettlingly agile, each step accompanied by a disturbing contortion of its twisted anatomy. Its skin, if one could call it that, appeared mottled and scarred, revealing a history of unknown horrors. The creature's elongated limbs terminated in claws that seemed capable of tearing through anything in its path. The air was thick with an acrid scent as the creature approached, revealing its predatory intent. Frozen in terror, I watched as the creature locked eyes with me, its gaze penetrating the veil between reality and nightmare. The balcony became a stage for a macabre dance, the creature's screeches and my pounding heart forming an eerie duet. As the night unfolded, the lodge's once comforting ambience transformed into an unsettling refuge. The creature's presence lingered in the shadows, leaving an indelible mark on the night at Mount Lauronite's lodge. The symphony of the mountain had taken a dark turn, and the creature's haunting visage remained etched in my memory. The grotesque creature, its form twisted and nightmarish, abruptly broke into a demonic sprint towards me on the balcony. Its movements were a blur as it closed the distance with terrifying speed. Panic surged through me as the creature, fueled by an unknown malevolence, slammed its full weight into the cabin door, shaking the structure with each furious impact. The door strained under the relentless assault, groaning as if resisting the intrusion of forces beyond comprehension. Fear clenched my chest as I braced against the balcony railing, the creature's screeches now replaced by the thunderous crashes against the door. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, the cacophony ceased, a haunting silence enveloping the lodge, leaving only the echoing resonance of the creature's last impact against the door. Uncertainty hung in the air as I continually surveyed the surroundings. Just as a false sense of relief settled in, a chilling tapping commenced. It was rhythmic and deliberate, echoing from every window of the lodge. The creature, it seemed, had shifted its focus to finding another entry point. The taps were like morbid percussion, creating a suspenseful symphony of dread. Each tap felt like a sinister whisper, the creature methodically exploring every inch of the lodge in its pursuit. Shadows danced across the windows as it sought a vulnerability to exploit. The once welcoming lodge now felt like a fortress under siege, its very foundations tested by an otherworldly force. The tapping crescendoed into a nerve-wracking rhythm, intensifying the suspense. I stood paralyzed, caught in the heart of the pounding climax of the surreal encounter. The night at Mount Lauronite Lodge had evolved into a harrowing struggle, with the creature's relentless pursuit echoing in the haunting symphony of the mountain's mysteries. As the creature relentlessly battered against the cabin door, a haunting familiarity swept over me, transporting my thoughts to a chilling incident from my past. Years ago, I had been caught in a fierce current while swimming too close to a dam. The force was relentless, pulling me under with an unforgiving grip. In those harrowing moments, I felt the icy embrace of imminent doom, the realization sinking in that there was nothing I could do but wait for the inevitable. Miraculously, I had managed to break free, just before the current dragged me into the dam's abyss. The brush with my impending morality left an indelible mark, a visceral understanding of the helplessness that arises when confronted by forces beyond control. It was a moment when the fight-or-flight response faltered and the stark reality of one's vulnerability took center stage. Now, on the lodge's balcony, as the grotesque creature relentlessly tried to find a way in with brute force, that same sense of impending doom resurfaced. The cabin, my supposed refuge, felt like a sinking vessel in a stormy sea, each impact of the creature's assault echoing the relentless pull of that dam's current. Helplessly gripping the balcony rail, the feeling of impending doom intensified. The creature's unrelenting determination mirrored the inexorable force of that damn current. Fight or flight, both were futile, and the cold grip of vulnerability settled in, much like that moment when I was caught in the merciless current. As the creature abruptly fell silent, the lodge became a crucible of anticipation. The tapping on the windows, reminiscent of that fateful current's pull, evoked a chilling déjà vu. In those suspenseful seconds, I stood paralyzed, entwined with the echoes of past helplessness, bracing for the unknown as the creature sought entry. The night at Mount Lauronite Lodge had become a surreal tapestry where past and present converged in a symphony of vulnerability and dread. A split-second decision made me jump from the balcony as I bolted for my skis. The creature realized what I had done and screeched after me. As I descended the mountain, the enraged creature pursued me with relentless fury, Its mutated form oozed grotesque tendrils, and its elongated limbs resembled twisted vines. The once molten eyes now glowed with a sickly radiance, casting a hunting glow across the night. Navigating the treacherous trails and hurtling over snow-covered crevices, the creature closed in with ghastly speed. Each step it took left a trail of mutated, ooze-like substance in the snow, painting a nightmarish picture of its relentless pursuit. Realizing the imminent danger, I accelerated towards the cliff's edge. The creature's screeches intensified, echoing through the mountainous landscape as it closed the gap. Just as its razor-sharp claws slashed at my calf, I slammed my ski poles into the ground with a desperate force. The abrupt stop sent me hurtling forward, my legs dangling over the edge. The creature, unable to halt its momentum, barreled off the cliff with a gut-wrenching screech. Time seemed to slow as the night air filled with the grotesque symphony of the creature's demise. The fall was a descent into a nightmarish finality. The creature, impaled on a shard of rock at the cliff's base, writhed in agony. Its tendrils flailed wildly, leaving a gruesome trail of mutated substance in the snow. The screeches, now distorted and gurgling, filled the air until the mountain fell silent once more. As I caught my breath, the eerie glow from the creature's eyes dimmed, and the mountain embraced a tranquil stillness. A gory tableau at the cliff's base stood as a testament to the night's surreal horror. The once vibrant trail and snow-covered crevice bore witness to the harrowing chase, concluding in the chilling silence that followed the creature's final, gory descent into oblivion. Limping back to the lodge, my adrenaline-fueled escape left me in desperate need of medical attention. The once cozy refuge had transformed into a scene of chaos, marked by the aftermath of the creature's rampage. Lodge staff, shaken and bewildered, rushed to assist me, offering the care I desperately needed. As dawn painted the horizon with hues of orange and pink, a surreal turn of events unfolded. Armored vehicles rolled up to the lodge, each marked with the insignia of a black hawk clutching a globe. Men in tactical gear disembarked, a formidable presence against the serene mountain backdrop. The air buzzed with an air of secrecy as they approached, their movements precise and purposeful. They presented a non-disclosure agreement, demanding my signature in exchange for their intervention and aid. The document bore the acronym CSO and showcased a logo depicting a black hawk gripping the earth in its talons. The clandestine nature of the encounter unfolded as I signed the NDA, sealing my silence against the night's bizarre events. The men, presumably from the covert organization represented on the paper, efficiently coordinated with lodge staff. They examined the aftermath, collecting samples and analyzing the mutated residue left by the creature. Their movements spoke of a well-practiced routine, as if such incidents were not as uncommon as one might believe. As the sun emerged, the armored vehicles departed as swiftly as they had arrived, leaving the lodge in an eerie calm. The mountain, now bathed in the warm glow of morning, seemed to conceal the secrets of the night before. The events of that harrowing night remained a closely guarded secret, locked behind the signed NDAs and the enigmatic logo of the CSO. The lodge, once a sanctuary, now bore witness to the convergence of natural mystery and clandestine operations taken out by an organization that navigates the thin line between reality and the supernatural. The drive down the mountain was a journey through the aftermath of a surreal night. The peacefulness of the wilderness road provided a stark contrast to the chaos that had unfolded only hours earlier. The first light of dawn painted the snow-covered landscape in a soft glow, casting an ethereal aura over the mountain. However, as the roads neared the cliff base, where the creature met its grisly demise, a profound unease settled in. The armored vehicles had left no trace, but the spot where the creature had landed was frozen in time. The mutated residue, a grotesque testament to the creature's violent end, marred the pristine snow. Its visage and the ooze had left an indelible mark, a chilling reminder of the unearthly encounter. A shiver ran down my spine as the road offered a close-up view of the remnants. The creature, once a nightmarish force, was no longer present, yet its essence lingered in the eerie silence. The frozen imprints and shadows in the snow hinted at a grotesque finality that had transpired just hours earlier. Caught in the grip of an uncanny chill, I noticed the creature's shadow seemingly slinking into the woods of Mount Lauronite. Dismissing it as a trick of the mind, I continued the descent, my gaze fixed on the road ahead. The rational part of my mind attributed the fleeting image to fatigue and the lingering effects of a night filled with horror and creatures of myth. As I drove away from the mountain's embrace, the rising sun painted the sky in hues of orange and gold. The tranquility of the morning seemed to wash away the night's ordeal. The creature, the CSO, the enigmatic events of Mount Lauronite faded into the rearview mirror, leaving behind a lingering sense of mystery and the profound realization that some secrets are best left undisturbed in the shadows of the unknown. Before starting this post, even if it's a story that happened years ago, I just want to make it clear that every name included in this post was changed to make sure to protect the kid's privacy. You see, ever since I met this kid, he's always intrigued me. But no matter how hard I try to ignore the little strange things surrounding him, I can't seem to brush off that awful feeling which shakes my composure. A feeling that creeps on me every time I look at him from afar, from where he can't see me. I was 36, and he was no more than 7. I should be responsible. I was his teacher, be able to rationalize everything and keep my head cool no matter the circumstances. Yet, it's getting harder and harder to act like nothing is wrong with how his brain is working. I'm not trying to inculpate him. I actually fear what his behavior might do to me in the following years. Hence why I'm writing this. You see, this particular student, whom I'm calling Basile, for clarity's sake, has always acted a bit out of it, as my colleagues and some of my friends put it. He's a kid that's always loved smiling, for no particular reason. He just loves doing it. However, I started to sense that something was wrong with him when he wouldn't stop, even after getting hurt or messing up in class. I can guarantee that Basile might be the clumsiest student I've ever had. What generally unnerves me the most about Basile, however, is his prolonged periods of complete blackout. He has a tendency to completely shut his brain off to the rest of the world and simply watch in silence the emptiness around him, only coming back with a laugh and teary eyes when someone urges him to respond. It's like he lives in his own little world most of the time. Sadly, it's a major deterrent in his social life. Given that he mostly dozes off or shuts his brain down during class, he's a subject of mockery that can resemble bullying a bit too much for my taste. I try my best to mitigate this negative attention he seems to always get, but that doesn't stop him from slowly becoming a pariah during breaks. To be fair, Basile does have something close to a friend. Well, at least he seems to like him, even if that feeling isn't mutual. It's a kid that I'll call Quentin, and what you should remember about him is that he unfortunately got caught in a car crash with his family. All survived with more or less minor injuries, except for Quentin, who lost the usage of his legs. He was inconsolable for weeks, mostly because he couldn't partake in his favorite sport anymore. That's when Basile started to become extremely interested in him, and when I truly started to see just how deep the rabbit hole surrounded this kid goes. Quentin, after finally gathering the courage to go back to school for the first time in months, was immediately jumped by Basile. Obviously, a lot of them were curious or saddened by his state. Basile, however, really was the only one to be excited about it. He didn't seem to have any ill will towards his now disabled comrade, yet the whole class was off-put by his earnest attempts to cheer Quentin up, often resulting in some fighting and crying on Quentin's side. Strangely, his protests never deterred Basile, who simply continued this thing without bearing any hard feelings or getting angry at the other kids. He became way more active, but was still trapped inside his bubble. He could still spend minutes, maybe hours, just staring into space, especially in class. In the end, I think it worked out, though. After days of trying to make Basile stop bothering Quentin, the latter came to me and simply asked to let him be. Even if I don't know why he's changed so much, he's the only one at school that treats me like a person. Doesn't make everything a pity party. He's kind of nice, even if he's weird, so I don't mind his presence. It didn't feel satisfying at all. Didn't feel right at all. Nonetheless, since both parties seemed content with the situation, I couldn't get involved in all of this. At least, I shouldn't have. But Basile's behavior seemed stranger and stranger to me. He was starting to speak of seeing Quentin walking in an empty space. He drew disturbing imagery, sometimes simply coloring the page with one color, before speaking of the many wonders inside the color. I couldn't bear it anymore. I needed to find its root. I wondered many times before going through with this, if I was going insane. Still, my curiosity and my fear won over my rationality, so I asked Basile to stay in class. He didn't seem to really mind or question why I asked him. Thankfully, he actually came instead of forgetting about the appointment, as he tended to do for anything related with administration. However, his clumsiness or lack of attention led to him hitting a wall and getting the door to his face while trying to walk up to my office. I also noted his lack of focus when I tried to reassure him that he didn't look too bad. He seemed entirely comfortable with how he acted these past few weeks. No regret or self-doubt. This led me to audibly sigh. Basile didn't seem to catch my exasperation. His expression remained unwavering. A small smile, empty eyes, and it was as if he was frozen like a statue. Knowing I wouldn't go far by trying to find a roundabout way to get him to explain his change in attitude, I opted for a more straightforward approach. Basile, I need you to be honest with me. What is it, Teach? The sentence actually piquing his curiosity. I spoke again, hoping my tone wouldn't betray any kind of nervousness. What's going on with Quentin? Why did you suddenly feel the need to be nice towards him? His apathy was replaced by something I couldn't read at the time. He looked extremely embarrassed, but also guilty. And still, he let out a laugh. It didn't sound childish despite his age. It sounded desperate. I can make things right, if I can take care of Quentin. He was starting to shake as his voice became weaker and weaker. However, this sudden show of weakness was quickly replaced by a sudden jump onto my desk. Teach, can I ask you a question? I backed off a bit before actually answering. Sure, but stay in your chair, please. He made a small, apologetic sound before resuming his talking. If something disappears, it's -1, right? I had no idea where he was going with this. Yeah? Ignoring my confusion, he continued. But if something is given in return, it's +1, right? I nodded in response. He was beaming with misplaced pride. He probably misunderstood my confusion or thought getting his teacher confused made him smarter. Well, if -1 meets +1, then they cancel each other out, so nothing has happened in the end. I couldn't bear seeing the conversation get more and more astray, so I asked, Basil, where are you going with this? Then it hit me. Is this about Quentin's lost legs and how you're trying to be an uplifting influence on him? Is that it? I appreciate you trying so hard to brighten his day, but I wasn't sure what to say next, or if him comparing this ordeal to a mathematical operation was a good sign or not. But in the end, I took it as just a little boy being concerned for a classmate's well-being. However, he looked at me strangely. No, the -1 is me. The +1 is Quentin's bad day. I was dead wrong. His cold answer, one that seemed so logical in his mind, frightened me. This was the first time in my career I felt any kind of fear towards one of my pupils. I struggled to get out another word, but I needed to know more. What do you mean by that? He smiled brightly, innocently. Well, I'm a bad kid, so this accident gives me a chance to be better. Flabbergasted, outraged, speechless. These words wouldn't even be enough to describe how I was feeling at that moment. Several thoughts plagued my mind. What kind of 7-year-old thinks and acts this way? How can he say things like that with such a carefree attitude? What about that moment of weakness? Did I imagine it? I tried to pry a bit more, but he wouldn't speak about it. His brain had shut down when I asked about why he thought of himself this way. He left my office without listening to me, that unnerving boy disappearing from my view, although his little cries in the corridor didn't escape my ears. I had the urge to join him in the corridor and comfort him, especially if he actually was putting up a front when talking about his self-esteem issues. Yet I stopped myself. I rationalized that me suddenly showing up wouldn't help him open up to me. But as he left, I heard his footsteps coming to a sudden halt. A weak "Dad" was all I could fully understand before the footsteps came back in my direction. Basil was standing in my doorway, his eyes darker than anything I'd ever seen. He wasn't saying anything, just looking at me at what felt like an eternity. I tried to say something, but the words just died in my throat. He opened his mouth to answer my almost question. If only I could trade your life for his, you invading prick. But it was deep, too deep. His voice couldn't belong to a child. Still, Basil was the only thing in front of me. He had to have said it. I was petrified. He left without saying another word. The suffocating silence of the classroom was all that reminded me of the fact that I was alive. After minutes, maybe hours, I continued my usual routine as if nothing had happened. I locked the classroom, went to my car, and drove myself home as I sat on my rundown sofa. Nothing out of the ordinary. Except I had no recollection of ever doing that. It was as if my mind had been completely shut down. I simply awoke in the middle of the night, briefly wondering how I even got back to my flat before going back to sleep. Well, sleep is a generous word to describe what happened that night. Nightmares kept me company, and I had to call off the next day due to my unbelievable tiredness. Eventually, I calmed down and went back to my job, but I became wary of Basil. I found myself staring at him more and more, hoping to prevent him from catching me by surprise. However, my behavior ended up being a frequent subject of questions and discussions among the students. Not wanting the situation to get out of control, I decided to take matters into my own hands. I needed to stop being worried about one of my students, especially if my behavior could end up damaging said student's reputation. I was a professional. I couldn't let my bias overtake my duties. I was scared. It pains me to admit it now, but I found myself terrified of Basil. Being scared of a grade schooler. How pathetic. That's why it took me a month to properly gather up the courage to ask for a meeting with his family. In the meantime, the rumors had begun to run rampant, and some people tried to bully Basil. I felt ashamed. It was exactly what I had predicted. Yet I could not act to defend this child. Luckily, Quentin had stepped in, even amongst his former friends. I wasn't sure if their friendship was healthy, but I was glad he was around, no matter how uncomfortable I got while watching them play. Sometimes, Basil would show Quentin people or events that didn't seem to exist or happen. He could also hurt him by saying that he could see him running freely somewhere, or abruptly stop his movements to cry out at something. As for Quentin, sometimes he would brawl with Basil, or a bully, but most of the time he would push Basil out of harm's way. It was strange how poor his luck seemed to be. Nonetheless, they were happy like this. I didn't know what to think. Still, I needed to meet his family. So, I stopped finding excuses. That's why 2 weeks later I found myself at the doorstep of a small but seemingly cozy house. I was greeted by a middle-aged lady, looking slightly older than I was. She invited me in, but I found no sign of Basil, only pictures of him with a man I didn't recognize. When I asked her about her son, her face illuminated with motherly joy. "Oh, my little angel isn't here right now. He's currently playing with his new friend." I tried to get her to clarify what she meant. "Are you talking about Quentin?" She clapped her hands together. "Yes, that's his name. He's one of your students, I assume." Poor thing. She didn't add anything else, but she didn't have to. She knew about the accident. That meant I could safely bring out the topic of Basil's behavior more easily. I cleared my throat. "Yeah, Quentin's been the subject of something terrible." She cut me off before I could add anything else. "That's why I'm proud of my baby for deciding to become his friend. I was scared he would end up alone, but to hear that those two are getting along so well, it's truly a miracle." The heavy feeling in my chest came back. No point in beating around the bush. I needed to be more direct. "About that, miss, I think your son's not being a healthy support system for Quentin." Her cheerful behavior slowly faded away, being replaced by something I could only describe as saddened resignation. Her smile was still there, but much thinner, her eyes pleading me to stop talking. A faint, "Oh no," left her lips. I found it strange that his first friend was handicapped because of... I found myself insisting, pushing her to tell me why Basil is the way he is. Tears started to stroll down her face, so I reassured her. "Miss, I want to help both of these kids, but please, be honest with me. What happened to Basil? Why is he the way that he is?" Regardless of her tears, her eyes looked into mine. The sadness and fatalism were mixed together in a stare I would remember my entire life. "Basil heard his father die in a car crash while on the phone with him." Despite sitting in a chair, I felt my entire body grow heavier with each passing second. I couldn't move. Images were flashing inside my head. "Was it... I'm so sorry for your loss," I said to the woman, who was now barely holding her tears. My words were sincere, but they must have sounded so fake to someone who's still in grievance. Still, I continued to talk in hopes that I would learn more and diffuse the situation. "If I'm not being too indiscreet," "You already were, you idiot," I told myself. "May I learn more about Basil, how he was prior to this, and how this affected him?" His mother silently nodded, eyes still red, and told me everything. "You see, my son has always been a secluded person with a view of the world that nobody could fully grasp. Among what you would describe, like seeing fictional persons or drawing moves on his own, are things he actually did before. Thankfully, his father did his best to connect with him, and it worked. Basil was always excited to show him his new creation or talk about his latest epiphany, but then the tragedy struck." A hiccup interrupted her tale, so I timidly tried to reassure her. "If it's too hard for you, don't feel obliged to continue." She shook her head. "No, I feel it's good to let everything out. Another oddity surrounding Basil is his poor luck. Whenever he tries to do something, most of the time it backfires. Some of the more superstitious members of the family even ended up thinking he was cursed. That's obviously not the case. It's ridiculous. But only my husband, his father, had the strength to protest, defend him, against them." Hearing this, a question came to me. Is that outlook on his luck one of the reasons he mostly prefers to keep to himself? She offered a weak, "I don't know," as a response before saying, "At least fictional characters can't hurt him." Another pause in the conversation happened, the air gradually becoming tenser and tenser. He heard everything. When I asked him to phone his father, I never expected. Her face gradually lost her color. That should have been my cue to stop prodding. But I didn't. I was foolish enough to continue. I've also seen Basil get lost in his mind, even with his new friend. He can cry or laugh about whatever he sees. Is there something other than fictional characters or famous people that he can think about? Has he ever talked to you about it? Wordlessly, his mother stood up and incited me to follow her up the stairs. A bit of a silent walk later, we arrived in the attic, where a little box stood out. It was well kept compared to the dusty furniture all around it. She opened it and took out a stack of papers. "He never explicitly told me, but I've seen his drawings," she said before handing them over. I felt like I was going to cry myself. Most had little notes in the left corner, explaining when or how he saw these visions. Most were crudely drawn, but strong with emotions. Some had Quentin happily walking. Some had Basil's father cuddling him or coming to school to take him home. But others were red or black, scribbled messes. Me when Dad got hurt. Dad going elsewhere. Quentin leaving. Me when Mom doesn't love me anymore. His imagination was completely corrupted by tragedy. No matter how hard he tried to forget it, his subconscious would catch up. His positive daydreams would turn to nightmares. He blamed himself for everything. I could now understand what he meant, despite how twisted his -1+1 explanation sounded. He was just a kid, trying to fix his mistake after being given another chance. Although with that said, one of his drawings intrigued me more than others. It was a poorly drawn representation of himself, being held by the throat by a black figure. "He haunts me." I presented it to his mother. "Miss, what is that? What are you doing?" It was that voice again, the voice that shouldn't belong to a child. The two of us turned around instinctively to see Basil, knife in hand, an expression of pure rage on his face. His mother tried to calm him down. "Basil, snap out of it." However, instead, his eyes locked onto me, with a look of hatred so intense, he couldn't just describe it with words. He rushed at me and stabbed violently at my knee. The pain was unbelievable. Yells, blood, cries. That's all I saw before I fainted from shock. When I awoke, I was being taken by ambulance. The mother was frantically apologizing to me. I tried to reassure her, but when I saw Basil showing no remorse next to her, I couldn't bring myself to be gentler with her. My fears had come back, and his eyes haunted me to this day. What was he talking about in that drawing? Surely ghosts aren't real. However, what is it that possesses him during these violent outbursts? I think I'll never know for sure. After I recovered from my leg wound, at least as much as I could, the school administration made no concessions. Seeing that I was now forced to have a cane with me for the rest of my life, they promptly excluded Basil from school. Quentin tried to continue going to school, but the bullying and rumors were too tough even for him. He begged to be sent where Basil was. Apparently they reunited in some sort of youth re-education center. I had no idea if I should be opposed to this decision, but it didn't matter. Sadly, that's all there is to it. These conversations and drawings did give me the insight on how Basil saw the world. A lonely place that he might make friendlier, but I couldn't help him. His deep-rooted self-loathing, his general lack of focus, his obsession with Quentin. Speaking of which, neither of them showed up at the class reunion, which happened this year. According to one of their classmates, the soul who actually saw them after they went to rehab, it was better that way. Had Basil crossed a line? Had he rendered Quentin so dependent on him? Just like a lot of things in this post, I don't know. I couldn't even think or say anything when the student told me about it. So, here I am, now 48, 13 years have passed. Multiple children became my pupils, and I didn't encounter another bacille ever again. The doubts are eating me alive as I write this, for failing to offer any kind of solution, for letting this disturbing kid get away. Am I a failure as a teacher?